was invited here 2 years ago, and the last time what I spoke about was the likely scenarios for what's going to happen in Syria. I said, first of all, that because of the inner core of the Syrian regime was bound together by ties of sect and kinship, it is unlikely to fragment like the regimes did in Libya or Yemen, or turn on each other like the regimes did in Egypt or Tunisia. And since it and its main constituency come from minorities.
Hello, Nazand.
Hello.
Thank you for staying up. You are in France, if I understood you correctly, not in London now.
I'm in France now, yes.
Yes, we greatly appreciate your participation in this international forum. Would you please provide a brief account what you basically do officially, unofficially, as an active woman, poet, an author, a researcher?
I'm sorry, I don't hear you properly.
Okay, let's try this again. Can you hear me now?
It's better now, yes.
Okay, let me distance myself from the microphone. That's why it was the re-echoing. So we just briefly introduced you as a researcher, a senior basically fellow, a poet, an author of a now newly published book about violence and honor killing. You have written recently an interesting and revealing article in Huffington Post about the role of women in revolutionizing the status of women in the Middle East. So, and particularly one report that I found very enlightening was the one that you had done about Yazidi women. So we are enthusiastically waiting to hear your insight into the current situation.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to address this interesting forum on political and humanitarian crisis in Iraq and Syria. I'm going to briefly address the case of Yazidi women following the attack of the ISIS. And the title of my presentation, after discussions with you, is ISIS War on Women, the case of Yazidis. And I'm trying here to answer some questions, including what has happened to thousands of women abducted by ISIS jihadists after their attacks on the Sinjar district on the 2nd of August. What is the scale of the tragedy? And what is the ISIS strategy towards women in ethnic and religious minorities? What are the risk strategies adopted by local authorities to save those women? And finally, what relief support has been made available to survivors of abduction and enslavement? Do you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah? Okay, thanks. What has happened now? What's the scale of the tragedy? When on the 2nd of August, via the fleet, the only Iraqi, the only Yazidi lawmaker in the Iraq parliament, made an emotional plea to the parliament. She talked about hundreds of Yazidi women who've been abducted by jihadists. That was at the early stage of the tragedy. Since, the number has dramatically increased. Some women's rights activists have been talking about 4,000 women who've been abducted. A UN report released in September says that 7,000 women have been abducted by ISIS jihadists. And recently, the Radio Free Europe stating Vian Dakhil, the Yazidi lawmaker, as saying that 25,000 women Aisha, I've been doing field work in Iraqi Kurdistan region, and based on witness statements, testimonies by survivors, official data, and reports that reached us, I can say that in the current chaotic situation, it's been really difficult to determine the exact number of kidnapped and enslaved Yazidi women. My own research, based on facts and evidence, says that over 3,000 Yazidi women have been abducted and subjected to sexual violence, including slavery and trade. That's about the scale of the tragedy and the trying to get an estimate number. So what has happened exactly to those women? The abduction of women and the sexual enslavement were planned carefully. According to witness statements, during the attack, Islamic State militants had trucks ready to carry the women off. They regrouped women and girls, systematically separated them from men, and taken them away to Mosul, and later to Raqqa in Syria. Witness statements and testimonies by survivors confirm that the women have been exposed in markets as slaves, carrying sale tags. Their prices have been varied between $25 to $1,000. They were forced to convert to Islam, forced to marry Islamic jihadists, according to Sharia law, and raped. Those who resisted faced execution. The sexual assault and rape were systematic. Most women say that they were assaulted several times by more than one man. They were passed on to one man and another. Some tried to commit suicide, and we have reports saying that those who resisted to convert to Islam or give themselves to the men were buried, some of them buried alive. The jihadists themselves have confirmed their acts in their media outlets, such as the English website Tablet, and also in a recent video clip that was posted on internet. They were saying that their acts were part of established aspect of Sharia, because for them, Yazidi Kurds are heretics and they should face conversion or die. In order to give you an idea of what these women really go through, I'd like to read a few lines of two stories told by two young women that I met in the book during my field work. The first story, told by a 14-year Yazidi girl. She told me, I was hiding behind the water tank in the front yard and saw them killing my father and brother and taking away my mother and sister. I don't know anything about them since. Second story by Sola, 19-year-old. She said, they put us in trucks and drove us to a big building before transferring us to a hall across the road. Then their seniors came and started condemning our religion and asking us to convert to Islam. Silence. They separated me along with other young women and ordered us to stay there while taking away the elderly ones. Then she continued by saying, the man I was given to rape me several times and then left me in the room on my own. I was shaking from pain and fear in the hot room. My entire body was sweating. Suddenly, another man came and did what he wanted to do, despite me crying and begging him, kissing his foot to leave me alone. Solab and Dunya, these are of course not their real names, now live with their relatives in newly established camps in the Hook. These are just stories among hundreds of stories that these women can tell us. What's the strategy of ISIS by abducting and enslaving these women? I call the title of my presentation War on Women because indeed this is war on women and it's part of the Islamic State strategy of war. I believe that the jihadis are not ideologically driven, not just ideologically driven killers, but also calculating sexual predators. And here I'm quoting a young researcher, Matthew Barber from Chicago University, who did extensive research on Yazidi community in Iraq. Of course, it's not the first time that women have been subjected to such treatment by militia groups. In wartime circumstances, even when the army of the state is involved, women are not only taken as spoils of war, as media reports put it, but their bodies have been used as a terrain of war. As so often happens in ethnic and sectarian conflicts, they are raped and subjected to sexual slavery by their attackers as part of ethnic cleansing strategy. This is really very important, and I insist on it in my various publications on this subject. This is an ethnic cleansing strategy adopted by the Islamic State. The ultimate aim of such acts is to weaken the integrity of the community. And of course, in the case of the Yazidis, which are a coherent community that numbers are estimated 5 to 600,000, these forms of violence are used to subjugate the entire community, to inculcate fear, to undermine community and family structures, to deliberately pollute bloodline of the population, as well as to contribute to bonding of the perpetrators through the common act of rape. These are strategic theories of rape in wartime, which have been deliberately practiced by the ISIS jihadists in Syria and now in Iraq. Local authorities, when they report about the abduction and enslavement of these women came up, and we heard about their testimony as a witness statement. Local authorities, in coordination with community leaders and activists, have been working with strategies to rescue and care for the enslaved women. The strategies include negotiation with Arab, tribal, and community leaders, not with ISIS at all, with chieftains in the areas under ISIS control to help free the women and ensure their safe return to their families. They also got involved in raising awareness and developing preventive as well as protective strategies and measures to help survivors reintegrate into their family and community structures. The negotiation often involved a ransom paid to the chieftains who helped the local authorities to facilitate the rescue of these women. The strategies consist also of large efforts to liberate the abducted women. So far, up to now, over 300 girls and women have reached Mount Sinjar, where they now live in overflowing cities and towns, mainly in the Hook and Erbil governorates. Officials and humanitarian organizations have been busy providing aid and care facilities through a health team of doctors and social workers, but they face a great challenge because the level of need is much higher than the local authorities are equipped to deal with. The I'm here talking about the post-rescue operation. Women have suffered physical injuries and psychological trauma due to kidnapping, slavery, subsequent sexual violence, and rape. The situation is really distressing. I've been to the ground and I met some of these women. The situation is distressing and requires an urgent need for explicit psychological as well as gynecological treatment, as some of these women and girls became pregnant following the rape. And abortion is illegal in Iraq. Kurdistan region is part of Iraq. So local authorities do indeed face multiple challenges in trying to provide relief to these survivors. In addition, with continental winter season, the entire community lives in desperate situation in camps with cheaply made tents, facing cold weather, including recurrent flooding. I don't want to go on telling you about the scale of the tragedy and all the atrocities these women have gone through and what they still go through, those who survived, and the level of trauma that they suffered. I would like to really conclude here by saying that since ISIS attacks, the Yazidi community has been subjected to horrendous crimes, and it's been in the mainstream media, the international community is being made aware of these atrocities. They include murder, the destruction of their home, arrest and kidnapping, enforced disappearance, as well as displacement, torture, and sexual slavery, the desecration of their holy shrines, and of course, as Kurds and Yazidis, they are condemned as heretics and devil worshippers. I mean, we know that all military conflicts involve principles of violence and they are, by principle, destructive. But capture of women, rape, and systematic sexual slavery are one of the most destructive aspects of war and violence. Abduction and sexual violence in conflict are crimes against humanity and have been recognized by the United Nations Security Council as a threat to world peace and security. Recognition came when the UN adopted Resolution 1820 in 2008. These crimes are not committed against individual women, but, as I said in the very beginning, they are used as a tactic of war and requires international mobilization at state as well as organizational levels. These are also acts of genocide, as ISIS acts against ethnic and religious minorities in Iraq and Syria, and against the Yazidi women in particular. They are categorized as crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court, but also as acts of genocide because they consist of a systematic, intentional, and well-planned operation to eliminate the entire group, basically because of its ethnic and religious identity. So these are acts of genocide. The international community should really mobilize resources and establish a fact-finding commission of experts to investigate and collect evidence from eyewitnesses highlighting, of course, the very topic that we are talking about here, sexual violence against women. And such timely data and documentation should facilitate not only the prosecution of those responsible, but also the international recognition of these acts as genocide. The process should also include support mechanisms for healing, and these are really important, for healing, reparation, compensation, preserving memories, and the reintegration of those women into normal life, including much-needed post-trauma support for victims and families after their release. Finally, I'd like to add that the Kurdistan region is indeed overwhelmed by the plight of refugees and internally displaced people. sheltering in community halls or being hosted by the local population or their relatives, and some of them are still in streets. Local authorities are willing to cooperate with international agencies with the aim of providing all necessary aid to these populations and to facilitate the prosecution of those responsible, as well as the international recognition of the acts carried out against the Yazidi women as genocide.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Your account was obviously appalling and very, very illuminating. I mean, the deplorable condition in which the Yazidis as a whole and women in particular find themselves is fading from the images. And once those images are gone, of course, you know, we tend not to see the tragedy, and you basically depicted with extreme clarity really the magnitude of the tragedy. We definitely thank you. If you can stay on for the roundtable, we'll bring you up again for any questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.